Anyone who follows mixed martial arts surely has heard of Jon Jones, also known as Bones. Jones is the former mixed martial arts light heavyweight champion. He's 30 years old. He's 6'4" tall. He's 205 pounds. His record includes 22 wins, including nine knockouts. He was stripped of his title in 2015 because of his actions in a hit-and-run accident. He was involved in this hit-and-run accident, and he left the scene without even checking on the condition of the person he was in the accident with. Nobody really knows whether he was on drugs or anything, but he later admitted guilt, and because of that, he was suspended for 1 year. He was also suspended for a year in 2016 because he got caught using estrogen blockers. The specific blockers he used were the drugs Clomid, and the other one was called letrozole. Now, these things work by reducing estrogen in the body, letrozole being an aromatase inhibiting drug. Aromatase inhibitors work by inhibiting the enzyme aromatase, which converts androgens, including testosterone, into estrogen. They themselves don't have much of an anabolic effect, although they do raise testosterone slightly. But the reason why they're banned in athletic competition is because it's considered to be indicative of use of other more anabolic drugs such as steroids. So if you get caught using estrogen blockers because they're on the banned drug list, you get suspended. And that's what happened to Jones. He later claimed innocence, however. He said that he must have used a contaminated Cialis pill. Cialis, of course, is used for erectile dysfunction. Jones claimed that he was given a pill that was told was Cialis, and it somehow contained these estrogen blockers. That was his story. It's kind of like a Lance Armstrong all over again. If you remember Lance Armstrong, the famous Olympic cyclist, Tour de France winner 7 times. Throughout his career, he claimed he never used any drugs. Finally, his teammates turned him in, and he finally admitted using them. But he staunchly denied using drugs most of the times he was accused, and this is the way Jones was doing it. On August 22nd this year, he was found to have, again, after his fight with Cormier. I almost said Chris Cormier. I'm thinking the bodybuilder Chris Cormier. I forgot, Daniel Cormier, I believe his name is. He had a fight with Dan Cormier, and he beat him again. He beat him. This was the second time he beat him, I believe. Unfortunately, after his win, his comeback win, they announced that he failed his drug test. And he failed for a drug called oral Turinabol. Oral Turinabol. Now, when they do the drug testing, they use more than one sample. They go by at least 2 samples, and the reason for this is that there's an outside chance that the sample, one of the 2 samples, could have been contaminated. For example, I'll give you a quick example. Years ago, some female athletes were accused of using testosterone when it turned out that their initial drug samples, showed amounts of testosterone that were above the allowable limit for women. But it turned out that women who drink alcohol, if they it does something to the metabolism of testosterone, where if you keep it like overnight, like a drug sample would be kept overnight for maybe a day or 2 or more, the alcohol somehow converts some of the substances in there into testosterone. It doesn't happen in the body; it happens in the drug sample. And when they were aware of this, they realized that these female athletes actually did not take testosterone. It was some sort of contamination effect because they drank alcohol. So because of that, they take 2 samples. Now, the first sample is taken right after the event, the athletic event, and then another sample is taken maybe a day or 2 afterwards. This is, again, just as a confirmation procedure. Well, it turned out that Jon Jones' first sample tested positive for oral Turinabol, and unfortunately, his second sample, the first sample is called sample A. The second sample was sample B, and the other day they found that sample B also tested positive for oral Turinabol, which means that Jones really doesn't have much of a defense. Although he's still denying, at this point, he's denying purposely having used oral Turinabol. Now, the point of this video is, why would a world-class athlete such as Jon Jones use such an old steroid as oral Turinabol? What are the features of oral Turinabol that would attract him and make him think he can get away with using it? Let's talk a little about oral Turinabol to explain why. Oral Turinabol, its chemical name is chlorodehydramethyl-testosterone. It's basically derived from the most famous oral steroid of all time, methandrostenolone, or Dianabol, the little blue pill Dianabol, which was the king of oral steroids. In the 60s, all the top bodybuilders used Dianabol, very famous. I once observed a famous bodybuilder when I was 14 years old at Mid-City Gym. I was getting in the locker room. I saw this very, very famous bodybuilder reach into his locker, take out a bottle of pills, and just sprinkle it into his mouth, like, like he's taking Pez candy or something like that. And I noticed they were little blue pills. And I asked a friend of mine in the gym. I was 14. I didn't know anything about steroids. I asked a friend of mine in the gym. I said, "Hey, what did that guy just put in his mouth? These little blue pills? Is this some kind of vitamin?" And the guy just laughed and he said, "That was Dianabol." And I had no idea what Dianabol was at the time. Of course, I found out much later. But this guy didn't take one or two. He sprinkled in his mouth. He must have taken 20 at a time. He was a very famous bodybuilder at the time. Anyway, getting back to Turinabol, it's very, very similar to Dianabol. You can say it's like a chemical cousin. The only difference being that between Dianabol and Turinabol is that Turinabol has the addition of a chlorine atom at the C4 position of the steroid structure. Now, I'm not going to get into the chemistry here, but by doing that, it imparts certain advantages of Turinabol over Dianabol, especially for athletes. For example, it's not subject to conversion to estrogen because of this conversion. This addition of the at the C4 position. Turinabol is not subject to aromatization. In other words, it can't be converted into estrogen, and this means, of course, less water retention, less estrogen-related problems like gynecomastia and all that. That would be of more concern to bodybuilders and athletes, but still, you don't want to be bothered with that stuff if you're a world-class athlete. Also, because of this structural change, Turinabol is not likely to be converted into dihydrotestosterone. Dihydrotestosterone is a byproduct of testosterone, where the testosterone hormone is acted on by enzymes called 5-alpha reductase, which convert it into dihydrotestosterone. Now, dihydrotestosterone is associated with such steroid side effects as male pattern baldness and acne. And because of the low affinity of Turinabol to be converted into DHT, again, this is not a problem with Turinabol, which is another advantage of it. Another advantage of Turinabol is that it has a very long half-life. The half-life, depending on which chemistry book you look at, it varies, but usually they say it has a 16-hour half-life. What this means is that it takes 16 hours to break up, for the body to degrade 50% of the initial dosage. So this stuff lasts a long time in the blood. And this, by the way, is the reason why steroids, whether oral or injectable, why they build muscle, whereas, let's say, some of these commercial testosterone boosters do not, because to get an anabolic effect, you have to have a sustained release of testosterone, such as occurs with oral anabolic steroids and injectable steroids. The testosterone boosters that are sold as supplements, even if they do work, most of them they don't, but even if they do work, then the most they'll do is give you a temporary rise in testosterone, which is not really enough to cause any true anabolic effect. So they're really kind of useless. And they're in no way comparable to anabolic steroids. All those ads that compare these testosterone boosters to steroids is pure bullshit. It's not true. None of them come close. I don't care what they are, unless they're, like the last generation of pro-hormones. They were old, discarded anabolic steroids. So, of course, they did work like steroids because they were steroids. Turinabol does share the liver toxicity with Dianabol. In other words, oral anabolic steroids, because of certain structural changes known as 17-alpha ankylation, they tend to accumulate in the liver, and as they accumulate in the liver, they cause a swelling of the liver called chemical hepatitis, which can lead to several types of liver problems, which I won't get into in this video. However, I will say the Turinabol, although it can cause liver toxicity, it's much less, not as potent, you can say, as its chemical cousin Dianabol. And of course, you know, you don't have to worry about estrogen or all that kind of stuff. Now, Turinabol was developed by the German drug company Genopharm in 1962. Previous to producing oral Turinabol, Genopharm had produced such drugs as penicillin, cortisone, and believe it or not, synthetic vitamin D. Oral Turinabol was their first steroid. Now, but you know, it didn't really garner much attention until many years later, when it turned out that its most famous use was that Turinabol was the main oral steroid used by the German Democratic Republic, also known as East Germany, in the 1970s and 80s. The Germans favored Turinabol because of its favorable drug profile, which I just mentioned. More so because in the early drug testing procedures, when they started actually doing drug testing procedures for the athletes, Turinabol, for some reason, the metabolites were out of the body a lot faster than the drug testing could detect. So the athletes who took it kind of passed under the radar. In other words, they were able to take Turinabol and not get caught, which also made the East Germans love this particular drug. The extensive use of Turinabol by the East Germans, it was revealed with the years later. They released the secret East German doping program, which was called State Plan Research Theme 14.25. This was an operation between 1974 and 1989. Turinabol was given to athletes as little blue pills, kind of just like Dianabol. And a lot of the coaches would, it's kind of funny, well, it's pathetic. A lot of the coaches would go up to the German athletes and hand them this little blue pill. And the athletes, some of them would say, "Hey, what is this, coach?" And the coach would say, "It's a vitamin pill, just take it." And they did. They took it. Of course, later on, a lot of these German athletes, they sued, class action lawsuits, because a lot of them developed permanent side effects because of using Turinabol and many other steroids that were supplied in the East German drug program. But that's another story altogether. They estimate as many as 10,000 athletes took oral Turinabol at this time. Stories abound about how many world-class athletes were able to set new world records using the drug, especially the female athletes. For some reason, and I wrote a recent article in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. I wrote an article called "The Truth About Women and Steroids," and I pointed out that for some reason, well, it's probably not really a mystery. Steroids do tend to actually, from a point of view of athletics, steroids work better in women than they do in men. Believe it or not, women get better results. Women athletes get better results when they use steroids, probably because women produce so much less testosterone. So it has a much greater effect on them. This was the case with oral Turinabol. The records set by East German athletes were unbelievable. There was one East German female athlete who was at the time the world record holder in the shot put. She was an Olympic champion. She took 2 oral Turinabol pills for 11 weeks. That amounted to only 10 milligrams, and she increased her shot put range by 2 meters. Prior to taking the drug, she could not, no matter what she did in the way of training or practice, she could not increase her shot put throw. It was like stagnant. She took the Turinabol for 11 weeks, increased it by a very significant 2 meters, and this was already the world record holder. The doses used by male athletes range from 15 to 40 milligrams, and they used it for 6 to 8 weeks. Although women were advised to use only a single 5 milligram tablet of Turinabol, many of the female German athletes, in their zeal to become Olympic champions and world champions, used up to 35 milligrams a day. In fact, the coaches actually said to the women, either take these pills or don't bother competing. So, it was an either-or situation. The female athletes more or less had to take it. And yes, many of them did undergo virilization. In other words, they became masculinized from taking those larger doses, which was permanent, by the way. That stays with you for life. The production of Turinabol was actually discontinued years ago Genopharm was sold to, I can't remember the name, a major drug company in Germany. And the major drug company, as soon as they bought Genopharm, they were already aware of the athletic use of oral Turinabol. They didn't want to deal with it, so they discontinued the drug. Ever since, but oral Turinabol was actually a pretty good oral steroid. It really was. And because of this, the demand for it was great. So it continues to this day to be produced by black market sources. Black market internet sites sell them. As I advised in a prior video, I do not recommend purchasing black market steroids because of factors such as contamination, mislabeling, and the fact that the drug that you buy might not even be the drug that you expect it to be. In other words, if you buy oral Turinabol through a black market site, it may or may not be another steroid. It might not be oral Turinabol at all. But hey, that's up to you if you want to take the chance. In relation to drug testing, the formerly oral Turinabol wasn't readily detected, which is why it's favored by the ACE. As I said before, later tests were able to detect it to within 6 weeks of use. In other words, if you got off it 6 weeks before, you passed the drug test. But however, and this is where the Jon Jones situation enters the picture. In 2013, the drug testing honchos developed a more sensitive procedure to test the metabolites that are left in the body after using Turinabol. So this made it, what this did is made oral or injectable Turinabol detectable for 6 months after its use. 6 months. My theory is that Jon Jones, or more likely the people who advised him to use this drug, had no idea that Turinabol was detectable for so long a time, and because of that, they told Jon Jones it was safe to use this drug and he would pass the test, and of course, he did not. So I think it's not clear whether Jon Jones used the injectable or the oral, but it really wouldn't make a difference because both of them would be detected. Most of the time, the oral Turinabol was the favorite of the two. As I said, why would Jones use this? It's because of its reputation as being one of the better steroids for world-class athletes. The fact is that countless world records were set by athletes who used it nearly 40 years ago. It has a reputation for significantly increasing muscular power, which would be a huge advantage for Jones in the octagon, of course. It also produces few side effects compared to other steroids, such as its chemical cousin, Dianabol. But when taken in larger doses for extended times, it does produce the same side effects as other steroids. As I've always said, when it comes to steroids, it's time and dosage that determine side effects, how long you use it and how much you use. These side effects can include liver toxicity and adverse cardiovascular changes, such as a lowering of your high-density lipoprotein protective cholesterol, and possibly increased calcium deposits in your coronary arteries. But similarly to the other steroids, when you get off Turinabol, most of these changes abate or reverse. So that's about it. I would sum it up by saying that regardless, and I'll say this for Lance Armstrong too, a lot of people put down these guys. Jon Jones is a cheater and Lance Armstrong is a cheater. But let me tell you, or whoever wins the Mr. Olympia, he wins because of all the steroids he uses and all that. Look, as I said in this video, in relation to oral Turinabol, there's no doubt that steroids increase athletic achievement, athletic ability. There's no doubt that steroids increase muscular size and strength. There's no doubt that steroids increase muscle recovery after exercise. But to attribute 100% of athletic or bodybuilding success to using any amount of steroids is nonsensical and ridiculous. And it's usually said by jealous people. All right, I'm not going to say that using Turinabol didn't help Jon Jones, but this man is a fantastic athlete, probably one of the greatest mixed martial arts champions. Anyone who follows the sport will agree with me. This guy is a fantastic, great athlete, and he'd be a great champion without using any steroids. He used them to make himself. He wanted to probably guarantee a win. Probably wanted to beat up Cormier. I've worked with boxers over the years who asked me to give him certain supplements that would allow them to really punish their opponent. They wanted to kind of break their face. And, and since pro-hormones were legal back in those days, I used to give them some pro-hormones, which made them more aggressive, and they got what they wanted. They wound up busting the other guy's face up, but that's what they wanted. So that could have entered into Jon Jones' thinking also. I don't know. I don't know the man personally. But again, to attribute his athletic success to the use of steroids, yes, he broke the rules. Yes, he probably deserves to be suspended. Should his career be cut off, that would not be right, in my opinion. This man is great. He's a great athlete. I think he should be given another chance. I think his punishment should be that he should have to undergo random drug testing throughout the year to ensure that he doesn't go back to taking steroids. I don't think he's stupid enough to do that. But in any case, that's it for this particular video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want further information about nutrition and anabolic steroids, not how to use them, but their effects and all the science behind them, growth hormone, other drugs, hormonal therapy for health, such as testosterone replacement therapy, supplements, fat loss techniques that actually work, exercise science. Subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. The best source of information anywhere. Beats anything on the internet. No blog site, no website can match my Applied Metabolics newsletter, because it includes not only the latest evidence-based research, but it also, more importantly, includes my 55 years of personal experience and study. It's included in every issue, stuff that you cannot find anywhere else. I guarantee you, no matter what your level of experience or learning, you will learn something in every issue of my Applied Metabolics newsletter. I absolutely guarantee you. Subscribe today. You're going to be missing out. You're not going to find this anywhere. I have some fantastic stuff coming up, and one of my next issues, I'm going to have a huge article on how to apply vegetarian. If you want to be a vegetarian bodybuilder, what's the best way to do it? What's the pitfalls to avoid? That's just one of the articles. I have many other articles coming up in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever find in your life, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. They're fantastic. You know, when I walk my dogs, that's when I get a lot of my ideas for my newsletter. It's fantastic, and not only that, but walking the dogs is good for your health, because they just came out with a study the other day talking about how bad extended sitting is. If you sit for more than 90 minutes straight, you have an extremely increased chance for mortality. And, walking my dogs gets me up. I walk them like a couple of times a day. So you can say that it gets my blood flowing and prevents this mortality effect. But, besides that, they're the best friends you can ever have. Adopt a dog today. Take care.